All right. I am C.W. Mayberry, and this is Bible 101, a Through the Bible study from Genesis to Revelation, brought to you by Torah, Observant, Apostolics. You can find us under Facebook under Torah, Observant, Apostolics. We are now in chapter 22, and beginning at verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. That's a bad translation. God does not tempt any man. God is trying Abraham. God is bringing to a resolution, a conflict within this man. God is bringing to completion or fruition a process of growth and maturity is what's going on. It's a trial, it's a test, but it's designed to produce something. It is not temptation. God does not tempt any man. All right. And he said, Behold, here am I, verse 2, and he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. And on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come unto you again. And Abraham took the wood and the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father, he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And many people not understanding, not being familiar with the Bible, not being familiar with the things of God, look at this circumstance and immediately they are shocked and repulsed. And understandably so. Here we have this, father taking his son off to offer him up in human sacrifice, which was common among the peoples of the day, the people of the land, and the religion in which they were involved. Strangely enough, you've had some 70 million plus children aborted in the United States, and no one's shocked or appalled about that. Very few people anyway. An entire generation wiped off the face of the map, taken out of existence, that entire potential of humanity gone. And there's really no public outrage. Even those people who are upset about it aren't upset to the point where they're risking their own life, their own welfare, their own health and wealth to do anything about it, or to say anything about it publicly. Very few of them anyway. But the point of all this is Isaac was never in any real danger. The idea here is to bring Abraham forward in his maturity with God. This is a man who is raised in a culture where you receive everything from your father and your father's father and your father's father's father, and it is your responsibility to build upon that and pass it on to another generation. We really don't understand that in our day and time, because we finance a house for 30 years, and raise our kids in it, and then when the kids are gone, we reverse mortgage that, and we spend it all down, and then we leave nothing behind, and you leave your children to start the whole process over themselves, and no generation is really better off than the one before it, other than through the circumstances. That's just the way we've learned to live. We get all we can, we spend all we get, and we make no allowance for tomorrow or for anyone else. Abraham was of a different generation, and his great complaint or plea to God was that I have no heir. This Eliezer of Damascus is that manages my affairs is going to inherit all I've got, and everything that I've done in my life is going to be diffused. All that I've worked for is going to be lost. I don't have an heir to carry on. And he wasn't just looking for an heir. He's looking for a physical heir, certainly, but more importantly, a spiritual heir. someone who would take the things not only of the physical increase, but of the spiritual increase, so the things of God, and communicate them to another generation, and through procreation, both spiritually and physically, broaden the scope and the influence of God in the world. That's the idea. And we now have an issue that would have arisen in his life. You know, who do you love more, Abraham? The gift giver or the gift that he gave? Who's more important to you, the God that gave you this son of promise, or the son of promise himself? And I'm sure that's something Abraham himself struggled with, because this was the chief issue of his life, and it had to be resolved. Because in this life, in order to enter into heaven, salvation, eternity, as you should, you've got to come to a point where there's nothing you love more than God himself. The gifts of God, the goodness of this life, the richness of this life, the enjoyment of this life, the pleasure of this life, which God provides all of it. If he's not foremost in your desire, in your thoughts, in your daily living, that's not satisfactory. And God is dealing with Abraham and bringing this situation to a conclusion. And I know it's that way because you see the same thing played out in the lives of other men, other characters in the Bible. And it's a lesson for us today. Well, let's read on. We'll get the rest of it in a second. Verse 7, and Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. And it's God often hides things in language, or discloses things in language, and we don't see it. It says Jehovah will provide himself. He's talking about the manifestation of God in the person of Jesus Christ, Yeshua Messiah. God will provide himself. God's going to be the sacrifice. God's going to take on a body of flesh and blood at some point in the future, and he's going to be the one that dies. Without Isaac, Abraham has no way to continue to let his will, his direction in life continue beyond himself. When Adam fell into sin, he entered in the sin and polluted himself spiritually, there was no way for God's plan to continue on, because man was now polluted. Every child that proceeded forth from Adam and Eve was going to be polluted. They were tainted by sin. They were under the influence of sin. They were under the influence of the author of sin. And everything they did would have been opposite of what God desired, of what he wanted. Therefore, it was necessary to find someone else to do that. Well, there is no forgiveness of sin without the shedding of blood. Adam is impure. Every child after him is going to be impure. The blood is impure. You've got to find an individual without an impure blood. If there were sons born to Adam and Eve before Cain and Abel, before the fall, they, in my understanding, would have been suitable, but either the offer was never made or they refused it. And the Apostle Paul later on says, it's impossible to find a man willing to do this. You're not going to find people willing to give themselves up, to kill themselves, die in order that others might live. It's a very, very rare thing. So that's the situation you're in. And God himself cannot bring to fruition his plans for this world without an heir. He has to have an heir. Therefore, God, who is God, the only God, who is a non-corporeal spirit present in all the universe, takes on a body of flesh and blood, becomes the man we call Jesus Christ, Yeshua Messiah, and offers himself up. And he was not God in a people suit. He was not God playing human being. He literally entered into the economy of humanity, and upon the economy of humanity, paid the absolute highest price possible. That life meant something to him, and he still surrendered it. After 4,000 years of separation from his creation, he once again was face to face, breath to breath with his creation, and had to be separated from it yet again, and in the most brutally and distasteful fashion. All right, that's what this is about. God's willing to take on flesh and bone and offer that life up for you. The question is, Abraham, Joe, Sarah, Susie, Steve, are you willing to sacrifice your life in order to access the eternal God, to live with Him beyond this world? Or are you more attached to the things of this world, so attached to it in that fact that you would sacrifice your eternity? That's the question of Genesis chapter 22. All right. Verse 9, and they came to a place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and he laid the wood on the altar in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. This kid's at least 27 years old. We know that from reading earlier on. And then there's no struggle. He trusts his father. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And again, there was never any danger. But it had to be worked out in the life and the mind of Abraham that this child was not chief. And he said, imagine loving God so much and then something else comes along that God gives you, that you begin to wonder, which one do I really love most? Well, there's only one way to find out. Put it to the test. Test, not temptation. And that's precisely what Jehovah God does here. For our benefit, for our example, so that we can see this and learn from it, and for Abraham's benefit, so that he can know the answer to the question, who do you love more? And not have to deal with that in his conscience any longer. All right. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from him. And the word fears there is not terror. It has to do with making God chief among all things. All right. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him. Okay, I have gotten off course. Give me 1 second. Like I said, these lessons are all raw, unedited. We don't go back and fix anything. You get it warts and all, just like in real life. Yeah. Verse 13, Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. Some people would say that it was a crown of thorns. It's very poetic. I don't know that it's true, but it certainly points to Jesus Christ. And Abraham went and took the ram, and he offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. It's a substitutional offering, something you need to hold on to there, substitutional offering. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son. That's the point. He's precious to him. This is the most precious thing in this man's life. All right? That in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of heaven, and as the sand which is upon the sea, which is spiritual and physical, the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gates of his enemies, which is where you want to be, not under oppression, but above it, and in control of those that would oppress you. Not that you would oppress them, but certainly got the ability to defend yourself from them and the multiplicity of things they might ply against you. All right. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. He's talking about both the Jewish nation and Yeshua Messiah, Jesus Christ himself. Both. Primarily Jesus. Because thou hast obeyed my voice. If he hadn't obeyed, God would have had to have found another man, taking more time to unroll this plan that is of such benefit to you and I. All right. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. This is back on the other side of the river. Huz the firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Kemuel the father of Aram, and Sheshed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel, and Bethuel begat Rebekah, the woman. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Rimah, she bare also Teba, and Gaham, and Tahash, and Macha. And I'm doing the best I can with these names. You're better at it than me. God bless you. All right. And we're only 15 minutes into this, but I'm not sure how far I want to go with it, because the rest of it is... let's do it. Chapter 23. And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old, so 127 years she lived. These were the years of the life of Sarah, and Sarah died at Kirjath Arubah, yeah. The same was Hebron in the land of Canaan. I like Hebron better. And Abraham came to mourn for her, Sarah, and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, these are the strangers in the land. These are not good people, actually, but I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of the burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children, because when people die, at some point you need to move on. Doesn't mean you don't love them, but you can't dwell there forever. It'll just sour your life. I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, hear us, my Lord. Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth, and he communed with them, saying, if it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field, for as much money as it is worth, and he shall give it to me for a possession and a burying place amongst you. So he wants to pay for this. He wants to make sure that there's no contest about whose it is, who it belongs to, that there's no problem with it in the future generations, that there's a witness there that they know what is what. So Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even all that went in at the gate of his city, saying, there's an audience here, the world, they know what's going on. Nay, my Lord, hear me, the field I give thee, and the cave that is therein, I give it thee in the presence of the sons of my people, give it thee, bury thy dead. Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land, and he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people and of the land, saying, but if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me, I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto him, my Lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money, with the merchant. You know, these people may have been friendly toward him at this point. You don't know what's going to happen in future generations. You don't know how the people around you are going to treat the children you birth, foster, bring into the world, whether they be physical or spiritual. You need to do as much as you can to protect them and their interests now, by not putting them in a position of compromise or near compromise later on. All right. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed the Ephron for silver, for which he had named the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money, with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, which is before the mountain where Isaac obviously was taken. The field and the cave which was therein, all the trees that were in the field, there were in all the borders round about, were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth. I'm assuming that means he marked the borders of it somehow. Before all that went in at the gate of the city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Macpelah. I'd like to know what they did with the body in the interim. If it was embalmed as do the Egyptians, I have no idea. I'd be interested to find out. The same is in Hebron, is in the land of Canaan, in the field and the cave that is therein. And this is all in the land of Israel now, because he did inherit it, and it does belong to them. And is therein were made sure unto Abraham for possession, for a burying place by the sons of Heth. And we're going to stop that going into 24 next time around. It's a little bit short. Get a prayer life. Learn to pray. If you don't know how to pray, get alone someplace where it's quiet, where you're not going to be disturbed. Get yourself a chair and another chair, and talk to that chair if God is sitting right there. Pour out your heart, be sincere, and don't stop, and make a habit of it. And I'm telling you, he will answer. If there's anything sincere in you at all, he will answer. And if not, well, then you know you're probably not going to do that anyway, because you're going to think it's crazy. But God answers what's put on the altar. You survey the Bible, people are always putting something on the altar first, and then God answers. People want God to come to them. You're talking about God. You want God to come to you. You need to entreat the presence of the King. You need to invite the presence of the King. You need to do something to demonstrate that you have at least a basic understanding of who he is and who you are relative to him. That is God. That is the Creator, and you are the creation. All good things flow forth from him, and you are dependent upon him for your life, for your breath, for the next heartbeat. And pick up that Bible and begin to read it. Don't be in a hurry. Take it chapter by chapter, verse by verse, and I would suggest you start at Genesis 1:1, and get the panoramic view of it. Get an overall understanding, because it's a progression. It's a beautiful story, and things you see later on will make a great deal more sense when you have the background, when you have a Hebraic background. The Bible is a Hebrew book. Okay, it is written by God through the office, through the utility of men who are all Hebraic. They're all Jewish, if you will. We use that word a little bit loosely, but it's one culture. This is not a Western Gentile book. This is not an American book. We think it is. We think that God wrote the Bible for us, and we've got all the understanding. This is a Middle Eastern culture. This is an ancient culture. This is a culture whose basis and moorings and mores are quite different from what we have today. And you have to go back and look at it and dig into it, and don't assume anything. The story of Abraham and Isaac, you can become quite offended at that quite quickly. But like I said, we offer up children every day in this nation, and nobody's rushing to stop that. In fact, if you try it, they'll jail you. They'll imprison you. So how far removed are we from what God originally intended? Quite a ways, in fact. Let me pray for you, and I'm going to end this. This is, of course, lesson number 10. I should have said that at the beginning. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ, in the name of Yeshua Messiah, I pray. God, touch the hearts and the minds of anyone watching this. Touch the hearts and the minds, God, of those listening to it today or a year or 10 years from now, whatever it may be. Open their hearts, open their minds, open their understanding. Put your hand on their life. Lead them and guide them. Bring them to fellowship. Help them find someone who believes, God, as you would have believed. Someone who knows and understands that there is no Old Testament, New Testament. That it is all one book. It is all one continued narrative. You can't cut one off from the other. You can't have a New Testament without an Old Testament. Jesus Christ is the delivery of the promise made unto Abraham. And that delivery of that promise is made in what we call the New Testament. and the outpouring of the Spirit, or which is really a return of the visitation of God to men because of the elimination of the sin question. Now what was not possible since the garden, since the fall, is possible. That's what's going on there. Touch these people and cause them to understand it. You have to have the whole counsel of God. You've got to know what's going on in the 5 books of Moses. You've got to know what's going on in Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. You've got to understand those things in order to understand Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in order to understand that culture. We're looking for a world that we have not yet seen, that we have not yet known, because we are strangers from it, born in a strange land. But the King is coming, and to reward his own, to gather them unto himself, and to establish it. And you've got to know what you know for yourself. You've got to know it because you dug it out of the book, or at least confirmed it, what somebody else had taught. What's going on in 99.99% of the churches in America is absolutely ridiculous. These people don't know God. They don't. I don't care how many degrees they got. They don't know God. And they couldn't tell you how to be saved because they aren't saved themselves. And that's a fact. In the name of Yeshua Messiah, in the name of Jesus Christ, the great and mighty God, the soon coming King, I pray God touch you, increase you, cause you to be strengthened with knowledge and understanding. Amen and amen. Boom.